The construction industry in Kenya plays a critical socio-economic role, and the National Construction Authority is the agency in charge of supervision as well as coordination in this industry. Engineer Maurice Okech is the Executive Director of NCA. He's joining us on this week's episode of Inside the Government. Thank you very much indeed, Engineer Okech, for joining us.
Thank you, O'Brien.
Can you give us a bird's eye overview of this current situation in this industry?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I also want to thank the KBC fraternity for this opportunity. As you have said, my name is Engineer Maurice Okech, the Executive Director of National Construction Authority, which is charged with the responsibility of overseeing and coordinating the construction industry in Kenya. And we regulate the entire construction industry. Within that mandate, we have 3 pillars, as I may say it. One of them is regulation, and this is where we license contractors. And we are happy that today we have an opportunity to be at one of the sites which is key for our country, a site which is the Dongogundu project, which is a road that's opening or connecting the county of Mombasa to the county of Kwale via a road, which is going to be one of the economic transformation projects. And for this contractor to have started and taken this job, it must have been issued with a license from National Construction Authority. From a standards perspective, that's a sign of quality that he has the capacity to do this kind of a project. As you've seen, it's very massive. And for us to license such a contractor, it means he has demonstrated capacity and the capability to do that kind of a project. So that's part of regulation. Whether they are foreign contractors or local contractors, they must be issued by a license. This particular one is a foreign contractor, and a foreign contractor cannot be registered under Category 1. So this is Category 1 roadworks contractor, and for them to be able to undertake this massive project. The other regulatory aspect is basically registration of all projects in the country, whether they're in a building sector, road sector, or water sector, or any other type of project, as long as it's construction project. To that extent, we issue a compliance certificate after the developer or the project implementing agency applies for registration of a project. The purpose of registration is key because the government want to have a database of all projects happening across the entire construction spectrum by knowing who was the contractor, were they qualified, who was the project implementing agency, who was the engineer for the job, if the project required an architect, who was the architect, who was the quantity surveyor, and how much was the cost of project. This is very important so that even in future, if we wanted to undertake a maintenance on that particular product out of that project, you would just go back to the database, check information, and you're able to undertake the maintenance. You don't have to come and start digging out information which may have over time changed its composition. So the information is intact in the database of National Construction Authority. So project registration is very key, and this is being done by the project implementing agency. Under the regulatory space, we also have a mandate to continually visit construction sites and check compliance. For instance, if you wanted to know whether the contractor was registered in this project, is the one undertaking that project, we'll be able to know by carrying out a compliance check and even check the extent of the project whether it meets the information submitted at the time of project registration. And lastly, at our regulatory space, we also accredit construction workers as well as site supervisors. So all the skilled construction workers in a project like this one, all site supervisors, to the extent those who are now doing the actual construction, need to have what we call accreditation card from National Construction Authority. The second pillar is capacity building. A project like this one, when it's being undertaken by a foreign contractor, a contractor from outside the country, one of the requirements is that they must partner with a local contractor to a minimum of 30%. If that 30% component is the magnitude of that 30% is bigger than what one particular single local contractor can do, then we get a consortium of many local contractors to the tune that can be able to take capacity of that 30% of that project. And that is very important because within that arrangement, the local contractor will have acquired technology which could have been onboarded on the project from outside Kenya. That's new technology in terms of even capacity building and technology transfer. So that is a very structured way of training that is captured in the law. Of course, you might not forget the economic benefit that the local contractor will be able to gain even from that project once they partner with a foreign contractor.
And of course, also skills
transfer, very, very important. So that's what we are looking at. And look at even once a project is delivered, it must be maintained from there on. So even maintenance skills will be onboarded as they do the project. If you want to maintain, they'll have already acquired enough skills to come and maintain that project even in future. And of course, our pillar is advisory to government through our cabinet secretary on matters construction, and that's why we have a very strong research arm also to do that. So if you look at our mandate, which is quite touching on oversight and coordination, that's our role, and we ensure that all projects have met the legal requirements and statutory requirements for our country, our land, Kenya.
And so, I mean, you have a very well-defined role within the construction value chain. And I mean, in most cases, when there's a disaster in the construction industry, the one agency that gets the slack is the National Construction Authority. When you bear in mind that there are multiple players in this industry, from architects to engineers, why is it that everybody talks about NCA?
Well, I want to believe, first of all, we have what we call a shared responsibility among all the players. We actually here in Mombasa, and our team leader is our PS State Department of Public Works, and we are here for a very critical workshop, which is a 5-day retreat, where all sectors, all agencies that play this critical role are sitting together to review their successes after the reconstitution of the multi-sectoral committee on safety of structures across the country was done in 2022. So now 1 year down the line, we are here to take stock and also plan ahead so that we continue working together. Now, if you pick one agency and leave every other agency out, you've actually missed the link. So what is important is that you must, first of all, if there is an issue, an incident, an investigation is done through an inquiry, which is a very elaborate process. And at the end of it, a finding will be made, which will determine what could have been the cause of that particular incident. Of course, if the gaps are identified, it gives opportunity to nip or to come up with the recommendations that will deal with those gaps in the future. It's like a lesson learned from an incident, so that we all work together. So we cannot say when an incident occurs, one institution is to blame. It's all of us. It's a collective responsibility that all of us must work towards ensuring that nothing happens again. And that's why we are now working as one government approach to ensure that we don't do blame games, but we work together objectively for a common purpose to ensure we have safe structures across the country. Yes.
I was going through, a report by the National Disaster Management Unit on the number of buildings that have collapsed in the last 6 years, and the number of fatalities, stands at 69, and the most affected are Kiambu and Ayers. Why is this the case, and what are we doing as a country to bring this number to zero?
Well, let me connect that question with what we see on the project registration side. Every year, we register new projects not less than 5,000. New projects every year. These are projects that have been registered and are compliant as far as registration is concerned. We also inspect more than 25,000 projects across the country. this inspection is meant that maybe the 5,000 projects may be inspected more than once, but also we may also come across projects that are not registered. We also go ahead and inspect, and we find them to be non-compliant. Then we have to deal with that and ensure that they comply. Now, if you look at the buildings that are collapsing, is actually less than even 0.5%. In fact, it's very small, but we cannot say it's negligible because every collapse leads to loss of lives, unfortunately, sometimes. Every collapse leads to loss of property and, of course, an economic loss and, of course, injuries. And if you look at it that way, then we must ensure there is no collapse at all. There's what we call zero collapse across the entire construction sector. So if you look at Kiambu and Nairobi, and I go back again to the registration portal I've talked about, Nairobi accounts for about 30% of the 5,000 projects that we register every year. That means the rate of development of construction in Nairobi is quite high. And of course, that's
about 1,500 projects.
Exactly. And that means there's a high likelihood that if, statistically, if anything is to occur, Nairobi statistically will be the first one, then followed by Kiambu, and of course the other metropolitan counties around Nairobi, and of course across the country. But if you look at the last 2 years or so, this particular challenge of collapsing buildings has tremendously reduced, and we want to work towards a zero incident going forward, and it's through the collaborative approach, through the multi-agency approach. This is what we are working and doing together to ensure that we mitigate those incidents.
One of the issues that NCA has decried in the past is the fact that it doesn't have the powers to arrest.
In a nutshell, we have actually been attached, given police officers who are attached to National Construction Authority by way of dealing with the issues of arrest, should that requirement be needed. And how did this happen? In 2020, we had a revision of the National Construction Authority Act, which onboarded the issues of additional penal provisions, which gave us the powers to additional enforcement powers, which gave us some penalties which are not there in the originally when the act was created, to the extent that if someone is found to be willfully defying orders of closure notice or suspension, they can be arrested, taken to court, and if they are found guilty by a competent court of law, then they can be fined a fine of not more than 1 million or a jail term of not more than 3 years or both, as the judge may find it. So this collaboration with the National Police Service has really helped in terms of enhancing our enforcement provision, and now we are seeing reduced cases of collapses because people are now willing to comply once they know that at least the powers are there.
We have a situation whereby, yes, construction sites are closed, individuals are arrested, they are taken to court, but we never see the end product of all this, which should be maybe jail term or harsh fines. So where is the weak link here?
Well, since we onboarded the National Police Service in May 2022, that's more than 1.5 years now, or thereabout, we've been able to prosecute about 50 cases in court. And of course, out of those 50, I want to say some of them are still ongoing. And when a case is in court, you're not allowed to talk about it. But the ones which have been concluded, I think are about 5 in the favor of National Construction Authority. And this opportunity like this is very important because we're able to share some of the successes.
5 cases out of 50.
Out of 50.
Mm-hmm. So that's past 10%.
10% is a number, which is very good. And of course, others are still in court. And as they move forward, maybe using the precedence of the 5 cases, we are likely to get more. And this is what is documented, and we need to also tell the public or the development space, the real estate especially, because most collapses happen in the building sector, that the law is there and it needs to be followed, because failure to follow it may lead to a court process, arrest and a court process, and then, of course, as per the 5 cases I've set precedent, may be an example to others. Yes.
Is it high time that the law is amended to give NCA the powers to arrest and prosecute?
Well, I'll say this. You know, regulatory space is actually a progressive matter. And if you look at from 2011, when the Act was approved, then 2020, 9 years later, we got the additional provisions to enhance the enforcement. And now looking back, or looking what we need to do forward, of course, there are many areas that we may want to work on. And I may point out 3 of them. Number one, if you look at the law, it talks about the need to register a contractor. And then the law is also saying the need to register a project. What the law gives powers about is that if you fail to obey the order which is finding the site non-compliant, that's when you are taken to court after the arrest. But you see, it's silent on what you can do to that contractor who is working on a project that is not registered. It is silent to what you can do to that developer until now they fail to obey the order. So there is need to introduce additional penalties so that we have enhanced provision to ensure that whenever there's non-compliance, we can deal with them through the law. But still...
And what kind of penalties are these? Are you talking about?
Introduction of penalties like could be instant fines. That can be a deterrence. Where, like with the organization, that when you find you non-compliant, depending on the level of non-compliance, it can be a fine of a certain magnitude. It can be also maybe reaching out to the judiciary to maybe set aside, as we are discussing today, set aside a special court to deal with those kind of offenses, so that at least the justice is, the efficiency of meting out justice is faster. And also dealing with, having a special unit, so to speak. But before I lose my point, I wanted to say that there is need to look at where every gap exists, and that's what we have done. And we are working on the amendment of the NCA Act to address those gaps that we have identified, to ensure that we tighten the regulatory framework. And this will also help us mitigate the issues that we're seeing in terms of non-compliances. Mm-hmm. But most importantly, we can also not just talk about the doers. We also need to talk about the instruments or the standards that we need to enhance the enforcement provision. So currently we have an instrument that is coming very soon. It's at the tail end. It's the building code. So the National Building Code is... the new one is going to repeal the 1968 building code. And once the new code comes in place, it will address some of the gaps that are also there, especially in terms of the materials, in terms of the standards, and how we do things. So that even as contractors implement, as construction workers implement, as developers do their projects, there's a standard that has enhanced the regulatory framework as far as the building code is concerned.
You have also talked in the past about, lack of adequate enforcement officers. Has this situation been rectified?
Well, capacity building internally and externally is a progressive effort. Even as we speak now, we are now in the process of reviewing our instruments to identify the capacity gaps in terms of our internal human resources and other resource requirements. And from there, make recommendations on what needs to be put in place to ensure that we have adequate capacity. And as I said, this is very progressive. When you look at the human resource, when you look at the transport, the vehicles, because you have to be across the country, when you look at the offices, all these have to be addressed progressively. So it's a matter of a progressive approach, to the extent that every time we have to be on our toes, looking at what we need to review, what we need to amend, what we need to enhance, to ensure that we continually have capacity to address. But as we move forward, as we move forward in terms of the capacity issues, we are using the collaborative approach so that we also take advantage of other existing government structures across board through sister agencies, through other regulators, through other government bodies to ensure that at the end of the day, we leverage on their existence and capacities across board so that we can work together. And that's why joint effort is very important.
And I mean, we always talk about the responsibility of engineers, the architect, the National Construction Authority, the government at large. But what is the responsibility of the citizenry in ensuring that we have buildings that are livable and that are low compliant?
Very good question. What's the role of a citizen in ensuring safety in the construction industry in Kenya? From the regulator's perspective, citizen has got a very good opportunity and a good responsibility to be the first one that says safety starts with me as a citizen of Kenya. And how does that safety start with that citizen? If you see anything that is not meeting, according to you, the quality, it is very important to bring that matter to the attention of National Construction Authority, and we'll take action. You can bring it through a complaint. You can do anonymous reporting. You can also use our whistleblowing policy, which we have in place already. You can use all the channels. We have our social media. We have our contact on through email, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, as a citizen, you should not allow yourself to even go into a place which you think is not safe. Because if you go to a place that's not safe, if anything was to happen, you become the first victim that will be affected by that particular incident. So it's very important that the citizen knows that safety starts with me as the first potential victim if things don't go the right way.
Very good.
And then in terms of education, the citizen also needs to be constantly made aware and sensitized. That's now our role to ensure, and that's why this opportunity is very important, because we are now educating them to know what are some of the issues they need to deal with should they see issues that are not safe around them. So in terms of public education, it's very key that they're all also continually educated so that they're able to know their rights and what they need to do around sites around safe.
Finally, where do you see this industry in the next 5 years?
Well, this industry is the most vibrant industry. And I see it's going to be more vibrant. It's the industry that's going to have opportunity for employment across the economy. Even if you look at the GDP in the last year or last year but one, you look at a GDP of 7% against the average GDP of a lower percentage. It tells you, of a lesser percentage, it tells you that it was more vibrant than the national economy. Number two, we need to leverage on technology. So in the next 5 years, I see an industry that will be supported so much by the technology that we need to have in place so that even as we regulate, the technology will be key in terms of information sharing, in terms of our regulatory capacity, and in terms of even carrying out our work without having to deploy physical resources at a heavy magnitude. We can do them, but on a lower scale, but we leverage on technology to deliver our services. So we are now introducing a construction industry information system, which will be like the game changer for construction industry. And in the next 5 years, that will already be in place, and you can see it will make a difference.
Very good. Yeah. Engineer, thank you very much indeed for finding time to be with us here on Inside Government, and of course, for giving us those insights.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Engineer Maurice Okech is Executive Director at the National Construction Authority, joining us on this week's episode of Inside Government, and of course giving us an update where the construction industry is. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Have a good afternoon.